Hi folks, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet at Portsmouth City Council. This is being live streamed. I don't think there are any members of the public who are coming to speak, so that bit goes. In terms of fire alarm, if it rings, it's not a practice and we need to go, but unless you brought your ice skates with you, a meeting on the ice rink is probably not a good idea, which will be our normal place to meet, so we're around the corner on King Henry Street down towards the university. Okay, folks, thanks very much indeed for coming. We've got no deputation request, but Luke, you're coming to present a report from the scrutiny panel, so my thanks for that. But can we quickly go around and for the cameras, introduce who everybody is. Lynn, do you want to start?
Lynn Stagg, Councillor for Baffin's Ward.
And for this purpose of this meeting, Cabinet Member for Transport.
TNT portfolio holder, I forgot about that.
Yes.
Just a minor thing.
Matthew Williamson, Cabinet Member for Health, Wellbeing and Social Care.
I'm Darren Sanders, I'm a Councillor for Baffin's Ward and the Cabinet Member for Housing.
I'm Dave Ashmore, Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety.
Susie Horton, Cabinet Member for Education.
Ben Dowling, Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development.
Gerald Van Jackson, Leader of the Council.
Steve Pitt, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Culture, Leisure and Sport.
Joan Wildsmith, Democratic Services.
Peter Rolfe, Deputy City Solicitor.
Chris Ward, Director of Finance.
David Williams, Chief Executive.
Richard John, Chair of the Children's Safeguarding Board.
Okay, and when colleagues come to join us, I'm sure they will introduce themselves for particular reports. So thanks very much indeed. Apologies for an absence I have had from Jeanette Smith, who unfortunately has work commitment today. I haven't heard from Rob. I know he's not been well, so okay. Colleagues, any declarations of interest people need to declare? Darren.
Yes, Gerald. On item 6, after discussion with the Deputy City Solicitor, I want to excuse myself from that. I live in a HMO that is in the additional licensing area, and according to Mr. Balfe, that means I have a circuitous declaration, a DIP, which I think is a disclosable pecuniary interest, so I will absent myself from that item.
Okay, thanks for that. Anything else? No, okay. Minutes of previous meetings, colleagues, are you happy with those minutes? Yes. Thank you. Item 4, Richard, welcome. Portsmouth Safeguarding Children's Board Annual Report.
Thank you. I'll just go through what I think is the strategic priorities to share with yourselves today, put a little bit of context around what is it I'm going to say, and then obviously take any questions you may have afterwards. I think my role is, as the independent chair, is to hold the stakeholders and the partners that keep our children safe in Portsmouth to account. I scrutinise them with the team, the work that they do, as you'll see through the report, with various audits, and kind of I suppose to really start off really, I feel independently for the way children are kept in Portsmouth. Actually, I get a feel for real professionalism, real passion. Are very busy. The demand on children's services is very high, but what I don't get, and I think this is quite important, is a feel of actually we can't cope. I get a feel of people that roll up their sleeves and actually very committed professionals to keeping children safe. So from an independent point of view, I think that's just quite clear to make that on record. The report itself, I won't go page by page, but I'll take out what I think is the key parts. First and foremost, the priorities. These should come as no great shock. They pretty much reflect the rest of the country, really. Children experiencing neglect. Neglect is very hard to identify, and it's one of those categories of abuse where all the partners have a shared responsibility, not only to identification, but clearly to find solutions through it. Missing, exploited and trafficked children, and children affected by domestic abuse. We'll then go on to the training. The board has had training with 1,889 professionals. There has, and you'll see in the report, been a dip in the number of training that we've delivered, and I think a lot of that is around accommodating which we now do is restorative practice training, and I think some of you in this room have had that training. The feedback I've had is actually not only is it forward thinking, but it's actually it's pretty well received, to be fair. But the key thing, and it was raised at the Health and Wellbeing Board, is that at no way are we putting aside professionals that need the training. Those that need the training have had the training. Their start of practice is just the journey to go forward from that. In terms of data, I won't go into too much detail, but the Safeguarding Hub is a busy place. 20,000 referrals have gone in there. It's quite reflective again across the country, and again the key thing is, as a board, we have the reports from the MASH, which is the multi-agency safeguarding hub, and we've got regular contact, and board members actually sit on the steering group there. It is busy, but actually that's a good thing, because what that actually shows is our partners are alive to safeguarding concerns for children. They're both confident to put referrals in, and of course they clearly know what the process is to put those referrals in. Yes, there is a balance to say, actually, do they just blindly refer? From my professional kind of point of view, I think I'd rather the professionals referred, so we've got some sight of what's going on, as opposed to trying, shall we say, probably incorrectly, to deal with things in-house and not sharing that experience amongst the rest of the partners. The other positives that we've had is the child protection family attendance has increased, workforce development is in place for all the agencies, and the Gold multi-agency CSC child exploitation and missing group again is well attended and well supported, and that's the kind of a key issue for us and one of our real challenges facing young people today. The board has done some audits, and that's around the interfamilial child sexual abuse, quality reports submitted to child protection conferences, and the early help interventions. They're important because I think these are kind of agreed what audits we'll do, and you need an independent scrutiny to make sure that those that are doing what they should be doing are doing what they're doing, and that any recommendations are followed up and completed to keep the children safe. And then coming to the end, the case reviews. These are serious case reviews or reflective learning reviews where tragedies has been suffered by some of our families in Portsmouth. We've had 7 cases into the review. Needless to say, they go to an independent person to either do a full review of that particular case, or it comes back as a reflective learning review. I get those cases, I review those cases, make the decision whether that will be a referral for an independent inquiry or one that we would do or manage ourselves. The key thing for that for me is that the learning from those reviews they come to the board, and we follow and track the learning from each case that comes through as a review to make sure that that learning, as best we can, has been embedded and taken on by the various stakeholders or partners. And finally, the wider issue as a board, and it's a national thing with the Children's Social Work Act that's come in, is that we have to re-look at how we protect children from a board point of view. That's involved all the partners, and that's kind of having in sight the other safeguarding boards, Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Southampton, and obviously what the national picture as well. That's developing kind of as it should be. The key part here is that Portsmouth keeps its sovereignty. I think that was the one thing I wanted to see through from start to finish, that actually the key people that understand the children, the pressures of this city, and those professionals keeping children safe, their work doesn't get diluted or diverted in any way. That sovereignty is absolutely essential. But there are some things that actually we could do across Pan Hampshire and could do more efficiently and better, and that's been embedded as well. Too early to say what that would look like, 'cause it's not been fully agreed, but I'm quietly confident it's going in the right direction. That's kind of will change the landscape, not just in Portsmouth but nationally.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. Rob, welcome. Any interest to declare?
No, and apologies, my server was down.
So, life is driven by one. It is a medical issue, I'm sure. Okay, thank you very much indeed. This came to the Health and Wellbeing Board, and I think I can't think of anything more important that the council does than looking after the most vulnerable children. I thought it was a good report and helpful, and thank you, Rich, for all your work and the others doing it. My question to people at that time was, thinking of what happens at council meetings, quite a lot of what happens is just debating society, where people are just talking about things where nothing's actually going to change or of much use. I couldn't think of anything more important for every single councillor to see than this. because this is about real children who are at very difficult times in their lives and what's been done to support them. So I would like this to get to full council. I am told that the Local Government Act 2000 means that is difficult. But I think, Joe, we can put it onto the agenda as for members to note.
It could only be an information item.
But I just think I can't think of anything more important for all councillors to see than this. So I personally, I think we should welcome this and agree it and support it, but also with a recommendation that it is sent to full council as an information item, so that every single councillor can get their teeth into it. Colleagues, anything else? Rob, as portfolio holder, anything you'd like to add?
It's an excellent report, and I think it clearly indicates the level of what's going on as far as children's safeguarding is concerned. And I do share exactly, Leader, what you've just said there, which is councillors and the public need to understand what's happening in the city, what measures we're taking, but also the rise in potential issues that are out there, and the reason why the public need to be aware of what's happening. Thank you.
Yes, I want to make just one comment, and this is anecdotal. A friend of mine has recently finished a stint here at Portsmouth City Council covering maternity leave, and she said that the team that she was working with were the most professional, dedicated and hard-working team she'd ever come across, and she has been working in lots of places. So that's from somebody who was actually on the spot. And there's one question I've got, and that is on page 15 of the report, 25 and the main papers, under the learning from the PSCB audits. What we found, bullet point 6, you say that where there are large complex families and multiple child protection concerns, it would help to have a lead social worker reviewing all of it. Do we have enough social workers to do that? Because I think that's a very important point.
Richard, although Alison is probably the right person to answer that.
I think Alison probably is better placed to answer that question. What I will say is they have just gone through a rigorous Ofsted inspection that will look at case workload in incredible granular depth, and their report was very good. So I think it's no different to any other local authority. I think they are, from a demand and a workload point of view, it is challenging, but I'm quietly confident in terms of resources. Alison is doing all she can to make sure that there is enough social workers to meet that demand. But I can't give you the exact answer.
Okay, Matt.
Thank you, and thank you, Rich, for presenting the report. It's great, as Gerald and Rob said, we'd had it at the Health and Wellbeing Board last week, and I know what a positive response it had. I'd just like to repeat something I said last week at the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is just about the restorative practice. As you mentioned, some of us have been on the training, and I know how useful I found that, and really eye-opening it was. And I'm really pleased that is reflected in this report, and it's something we are looking at doing throughout the council. But just again, just to say how I endorse this report, certainly endorse it going to full council, Leader, and I think it'd be really good for everyone to see the work that is being done, and also the oversight that the PSCB gives everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob.
Just going back to the question of whether we've got enough social workers, you can never have enough, but the reality of the situation is obviously you've got to fund to make sure you get the maximum and most effective social workers you can. And as Richard has pointed out recently, the Ofsted rated us as good in all areas. So that's a good indicator that we're doing the right thing. I think we just have to continue to work with this, and that's partly the reason why giving visibility to this report is very important amongst other people, including councillors. So rather than it just be down to a cohort of social workers to be aware of it, we are all aware of it, and I think that's part of the point about this, that we all get involved. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with the recommendation and that we send this to full council to note? Okay, thank you very much indeed, Richard.
Thank you. Happy Christmas.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, our response report for the Housing and Social Care Scrutiny Review. Luke, welcome. Okay, James, are you going to come and keep an eye as well? So I think for the sake of the camera, could you identify who you are and what your current role is?
Yes, Luke Stubbs, and I am the current chairman of the scrutiny panel for Housing and Social Care.
Thank you.
And I'm James Hill, the Director of Housing, Neighbourhoods and Building Services.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Luke, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, only a very few words of introduction, really. I mean, I thought to come along and say something, and in some ways it seems a bit sort of perverse for me to be coming and introduce this, because it was Councillor Sanders who chaired the committee when it took the evidence. I'm sure he's more aware of the discussions that took place at that time than perhaps I am. I think it's we've got a report here which I think is very positive and useful. There's been good work going on in terms of providing supported housing. Portsmouth is well placed in comparison to other local authorities in this regard, but that doesn't mean that there isn't more that can be done. As the report identifies, mental health and other issues are also potentially things for which a supported housing solution could be the right way of going. So there is opportunity to do more. There's opportunities to work with the CCG and others as well. And I think that's something which over the next couple of years could potentially be very important. So you've got 7 recommendations coming out of this report. Personally, and I'm saying this just from my point rather than the perspective of all of the members of the committee, I'm satisfied with the officer's response and happy with the recommendations. I'm happy to present the report to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Luke. That's kind. Darren, are you doing a double act with Luke to present this?
I'm not sure if it could be called a double act, but I'm happy to.
As a former chair who had a hand in this.
I have to say I really do feel like I was born at the birth of this, and Luke has come along as the midwife.
Neither of those things are pleasant thoughts.
Thank you so much, Leader, for that. Just to explain a bit behind why this report came about, it became clear that actually we're spending an incredible amount of money on 53 adults with learning disabilities outside the city, about £4 million, which is an incredible amount of money. But also what was clear as well is that there was increasing good work being taken place by the team that deals with adult learning disabilities in terms of providing them with better quality accommodation that offered better care for less money. And I happen to think all those 3 things are very good. And I wanted to see particularly what lessons the rest of the council could learn in terms of this level of provision, not just in the adult social care department and in the housing department, but in other departments as well. And this report teases out some of the really good work that has been done and also some of the lessons that can be learnt as well. And so unsurprisingly, I'm delighted with what Luke has offered up here today, because I think it really does take it forwards. I know from talking to people in my own ward on the Eastern Road who live in the housing that was agreed by me and implemented under Luke's administration, that they actually like the quality of care that's being put forwards. For those people who want to live independently, that's fantastic and they enjoy living independently. If they want to live with 5 or 6 people, that works brilliantly. But it's a much better and a much more humane, dare I say, form of care than anything else. So turning to some of the conclusions, unsurprisingly I'm happy with all of them. But I particularly would note the idea of trying to provide within the planning process and also within the capital process as well, good morning Yaya, a process whereby money can be allocated. I really do believe this can save money in the long term. I note, Gerald and Ben, on page 57 of the report, it says it's not known whether the council can insist that a minimum number of supported housing units be built on the former St James's Hospital site in Milton. That would certainly be highly interesting and I think would benefit a lot of people. So all in all, this is an excellent report. I think Luke has improved it immensely and put words to my the incoherent thoughts of the panel originally, but I think it's a good example of how we can improve, of the sort of things we're doing as administration, looking at the long-term issues, improving the service to benefit residents, and as a result, making sure we can bridge the funding gap. I'm not sure if you call that a double act, Gerald, but I'm happy to support the proposals. Thanks,
Okay.
Luke.
Thank you. And I think this is an area where people have always worked cross-party all the way through, and I think through all administration. So I think this is something we can all be happy with. Lynn.
I think it's an excellent report, and one of the recommendations that particularly stands out to me is the recommendation number 6, which is the consideration be given to developing a policy with the core strategy to require a proportion of supported housing to be delivered in major developments. Yeah. And I think that is really, really important, and because it's so inclusive for the people concerned. Yeah. And it's something, could we make sure that happens?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the recommendations that people are prepared to accept. So I think that then goes in and that will feed into the.
Well, having seen what's happening
team
along Eastern Road, the block there, and it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Matt.
Thank you. I'd just like to support both the report and the recommendations, and again thank Luke for bringing it here, Darren for his work on it, and also from Luke's point of view and the previous administration, the work that went into that cross portfolio working when Luke was in my position on the cabinet, and obviously Darren's predecessors in the housing side as well. The difference it's made, the difference this kind of accommodation makes to residents is incalculable, and as Darren said, it also costs less money, which is a nice synergy there. So it's a really good report. Like Darren, I would certainly bring out the St James's Hospital site. That has some real opportunities if we're successful in winning our bid for that. But yeah, I'd just really like to support the work that's already been done, the work that will continue to be done, and the recommendations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this, folks? Thank you very much indeed. That's very kind. Thank you very much, folks, and to everybody who's worked on this. Okay, next one, item 6, licensing of HMOs. So, a team of 3. So, who is going to introduce this? James?
Thank you, Leader. So the report you have before you is in my name, but I'm not going to talk to it. I'm going to hand over to Paul and Claire, who will introduce themselves and will be happy to take questions as well.
Okay.
Hello, Paul Fielding, Assistant Director for Housing, and my colleague.
Claire Hardwick, Acting Head of Private Sector Housing.
Lovely. Okay, thanks. Far away.
Okay, so this report is about the licensing of housing of multiple occupation, which we'll call HMOs. And this report is to update members on the mandatory and additional licensing schemes for HMOs. We've got approximately 3,500 of these HMOs across the city, and the council has been required since 2006 to licence all HMOs that have had 5 or more people and 3 or more stories high. That changed in October and removed the need for those properties to be 3 or more stories. So now any property that has 5 or more people in it as a HMO needs to be licensed. And we have approaching 1,000 properties that have a mandatory licence. We also have an ability at a local level to have licence for other HMOs where there is evidence of ineffective management. And the council run the additional licensing scheme from 2013 to 2018, and that finished in August of this year when the scheme had to end. And this report reviews those schemes and makes recommendations of how management of HMOs can be improved through better working with stakeholders. And I'm just going to pass you over to Claire, who's going to give you a little bit more information.
Thank you. So Appendix 1 is a detailed report about the current status of HMO licensing, both in terms of mandatory licensing and additional licensing. And I want to just highlight some key points from that report. So firstly, regarding the operation of a licensing scheme, basically a person managing the property must apply for a licence to operate a HMO. They are then subject to a fit and proper person check. And conditions are also attached to a licence regarding how the property must be managed. So, for example, how waste must be stored and disposed of. Each licence lasts for a maximum of 5 years, and each property that is licensed is inspected at least once within that 5-year period. If a property is found to be operating as a HMO without a required licence, we don't simply have the power to just close that property down. If a property is found to be operating as a HMO with a licence but isn't meeting its conditions, we would firstly work with the licence holder to meet those conditions, and if they still fail to do that, we would consider prosecution or enforcement action. It's important to highlight that licensing cannot control the number or location of HMOs, as this is actually the responsibility of the planning department. Licensing of HMOs deals with the actual management of the HMOs. Contained within the report, there's lots of data around the number of licences that have been issued under both the mandatory and additional licensing schemes, where licences have been issued within the city, and corresponding information about the number of complaints, what they were about, who they were made by, including complaints about waste and noise specifically. The information isn't conclusive as to how effective the additional licensing scheme has been. In addition to this, there have been recent cases of another local authority being challenged in bringing in further additional licensing schemes where they've had a lack of clear evidence to support the need for the proposed scheme. So the recommendations of this report are that the Council had set up a panel for the governance of the additional licensing scheme back in 2013, which was very successful. However, over that 5-year period, the terms of reference for the panel have become less relevant. The recommendations of this report are therefore that a reinvigorated panel is set up, including new terms of reference, new members, and to act as a terms of consultation to review the need for any further licensing schemes.
Okay, thanks. From my point of view, I think this has been a successful project because it seems to me the council has a duty to protect tenants, often who are very vulnerable, particularly in HMOs, to landlords who are not good. And having the additional powers to drive out rubbish landlords, I think, is really important for us. Either students who this is their first time living away from home, or people whose housing is very difficult or vulnerable in lots of different ways, other people who tend to live in HMOs, and I think we have a huge responsibility. So I'm really pleased to see we're going to be doing work to keep the additional licensing going and finding ways of making sure that we can do that legally, and to make sure that landlords who try to exploit their tenants don't get away with it. I think that's very important. So I'm pleased this is coming forward, and this is a piece of work I hope we will put a lot of work into. Rob.
Thank you, Leader. Claire James, just one of the things I just want to check on. Obviously, in my ward, there's quite a lot of HMOs, and I know for 5 years you had the special powers, which really did work quite effectively. The worry always is as you said, about what your legal abilities are for those landlords who don't follow through. And there's obviously a worry in the community about that now that the balance of what's happening in the HMOs is slightly changed. On your panel on page 94, for the board there, you've got representatives from what I would call the city plus landlords plus HMOs sort of things. Is there an opportunity to invite somebody on the board who maybe represent people who live with HMOs out there? The reason is because they're your extra resource out there, because they are the very people who do spend a lot of time reporting to us, and having them at the centre would in a way give you a balanced view.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, so the panel and the potential members of that panel is up for discussion. Obviously, we've proposed in here that the chair is chaired by Councillor Sanders. And although we've proposed a number of different groups, and we've already had conversations with some of them about the potential ideas, and they're keen on that, the exact makeup we can definitely fit to the needs of that panel. So, yeah, we're happy to consider all those ideas, and it will be driven by Councillor Sanders.
Okay, Susie?
Again, thank you for this report. It's really important. Again, with my ward, I obviously have an enormous amount of HMOs. It's not just students, it's other people as well, young professionals. And I think it's really welcome because where we've had successes where we've been working with tenants as well as landlords. But also, I think it's worth noting here that there are a lot of really, really responsible landlords in this city, and actually they get equally frustrated when other landlords let them down and their reputation down. So very, very welcome. Thank you very much.
Okay, Steve?
Yes, the additional licensing is something that we are very aware of. Susie and I are councillors in the same ward, and only last night, knocking on doors, I came across 3 properties, all of which had a less than supportive landlord, all of which were 4 people, not 5 plus. So in order to be able to monitor that properly, I think the issue we've got here is that we have a policy that has worked, but has also demonstrated there's a lot more work to be done. What we haven't done is monitored it very well. So we need to be doing that properly and looking for a valid route into reintroducing the additional licensing scheme, and I believe not just in the south of the city. What I've seen time and time and time again at planning committee is some appalling quality HMOs in the north of the city, particularly through the central belt, through Cockner area. We need to be looking at that as well. A lot of those properties have been subdivided with no knowledge of the City Council whatsoever, and it's quite clear from the number of complaints and reports that we get from residents that this is not something that's confined to the south of the city. So that I think we've gone away with the work. We've got a long way still to go, and I think what we need to be doing is actually talking to ward members about their experiences of what the additional licensing scheme has done and the benefits it's brought, because just last night, 2 properties, no green bin, so no recycling happening at all. Didn't know anything about green bins. Landlord hadn't provided one. Rubbish left by the outgoing tenants that the landlord hadn't cleared away. These sort of things we don't just see now and again. We see them every single week in our ward. So taking the eye off the ball is not an option. We need to take this breathing space to redefine what we're doing, refocus, and make sure we get it right.
Okay, colleagues. I think everybody seems to be happy with this. We just need to go and keep working on it. And thanks so much indeed, everybody, for your work. So, colleagues, you happy with the recommendations? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, care leavers offer. Yeah, James, could you give a yell to Darren so he's allowed back in? Yeah, that wasn't it. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'm here on behalf of Alison Jeffrey, who sends her apologies. My name's Kate Freeman, and I'm head of the provider services for looked after children and care leavers. And you have before you a report.
Goodbye, Luke.
A report that aims to update Cabinet on 2 key things: corporate parenting principles that have now been enshrined in legislation by the Children and Social Work Act that came into force in April this year. And the second element that Act expects local authorities to publish is a care leavers offer that has been co-produced with our care leavers. Care leavers are those young people aged 18 and 25 who have been in the care of the local authority. And at any one point in time, Portsmouth have about 150 care leavers that fall within that age range, and we're seeing a growing group of young people falling within that category. There are 3 recommendations to Cabinet. First of all, just to note the corporate parenting principles that have been laid out on page 2 of the report. And I don't think there's any surprises there. but government have recognised that we need to enshrine it in legislation because we're still seeing far too many care leavers nationally that are falling into those very vulnerable categories of homelessness, overrepresentation in prison populations, overrepresentation in homelessness populations and also in mental health institutions. And this is a means of trying to really get a whole council approach so that we work together and don't just focus on the social care element of a young person. The second recommendations is about approving the content of the care leavers offer so that we can further optimise opportunities and support for our care leavers. And I think it was quite humbling working with a group of care leavers in terms of what they expected and what they wanted from us as corporate parents. They weren't asking for outrageous things. They were asking for very simple support in much the same way as our own children and grandchildren would be expecting that sort of support. The third recommendation is that as corporate parents, it's recognised that it's appropriate for us as a council to continue to contribute to care leavers post-18. One of the big elements that came out of our consultations was that young people of 18 plus were saying we don't stop needing support from a parent, we don't stop needing that additional sense of being valued and cared for that parents will give to their children routinely at Christmas and at birthdays. Up until now, our care leavers at 18 get no financial support in addition to the kind of required bursaries and support with their care leaving monies. This is a means of trying to shift that perspective and to enable them to continue to feel part of a wider family and not to feel isolated and on their own. So, as I've said, the background to this is that we've recognised nationally and also locally that some of our care leavers are the most vulnerable young people in our societies, and they are the ones that we're often seeing that are not in stable accommodation. Some of them will be those in the properties that we were hearing about earlier, without a voice, and they're also those that don't have access to the ordinary support that children will have. When things go wrong, they don't have anywhere to go. We know nationally that almost half of our 25-year-olds are still living at home with parents. That's not a case for our care leavers. When they leave care, we have to support them in that transition and that step on accommodation. It has been really rewarding working with directors across the council on this piece of work and really seeing that sense of responsibility and accountability that each directorate has demonstrated in terms of their corporate parenting responsibilities, and knowing that in order to be an effective parent, we have to work together. I'm not sure that there's anything else that I would want to raise here. I'm happy to take questions if that's helpful.
Okay, colleagues. We've got clear recommendations. I think it's a useful report that reflects the work we need to do with kids or young people who we have cared for because their parents aren't able to do so, and that doesn't stop with a parent at age 18, and nor should it stop with us. So I think it's a very sensible thing to do, and we should support the report. Colleagues, are you happy with that? Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, Kate.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Item 8, seafront consultation. Claire. Welcome.
Thank you. Right, I seem to be presenting both bits of this report, so that's fine.
If you're lucky, you'll get to do budget monitoring as well.
That's brilliant. I can hardly wait. Thank you. Thank you, members. Right, the report covers two elements. It's a feedback from the consultation that took place over the summer, which was a joint consultation on the South Sea Coastal Defence Scheme and also the beginning of the review of the current seafront master plan. The report covers the consultation responses, how it was carried out, and links to the outcomes of those consultations. Overall, the consultations were well received. I think we had the biggest participation in any consultation probably the council has ever experienced, and certainly from the planning side it was enormously beneficial for us to consult jointly with the Coastal Defence Scheme and to actually get the interest that we sometimes struggle to get in planning consultations. So the report has two recommendations. The first recommendation is to seek authority to effectively begin the technical work on the seafront master plan. We've already started a series of internal workshops with key members of staff to capture ideas and views, and we'll look to carry out a formal consultation on some spatial options in the period after Christmas. The second recommendation is to undertake a further public consultation on the preferred option for the Sea Defence Scheme to enable the East Solent Coastal Partnership to prepare the planning application and use the response of that consultation to inform their statement of community involvement.
Okay. All right. Thank you much indeed, Claire. I think it's a very useful report, and I think there seems to be a bit of a theme here that the number of people who got involved in the consultation around the sea defences in South Sea was enormous, and it was really, really positive to get so many people coming in. And then when we get to the budget papers later, the number of people who responded to that consultation is again more than double what it had been over the last year. So we seem to be finding ways of getting being able to speak with members of the public and getting their views, which I think is hugely useful. I think probably with the Seafront Master Plan, many members of the public came and because they had been shown pictures, particularly in the news, of what people thought it might be like, and yet when they came to see what the reality of it was completely different. But actually, I think in some ways, having something that was a bit frightening in terms of pictures in the news was very helpful, because it actually generated interest in things and got lots of people to come to the consultation to see that wasn't what was suggested at all. So my thanks to the news for getting people to come along. But I think when people did come along, they were really pleased when I talked to people that there were real choices for people about to be able to influence what the sea defences was going to be like. That it wasn't one monolithic design all the way down the South Sea seafront. It was done into different bits with different solutions in different bits. And I think it's absolutely right that with the hundreds and hundreds of people who have responded, that we're able to take some of those ideas and to reflect that in the terms of the design. So my thanks for this. I think the consultation has been very successful, and thank you very much indeed for that. And what we'll need now to do is to take that on to make sure that in terms of the reality that comes out of this, that we are listening to what people in the city have said about how they want their seafront, and I'm sure that that's what will happen. David, as portfolio holder, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, obviously for the portfolio for the coastal scheme, not the master plan itself, but yeah, the consultations were very high, as you said, they're very engaged. And what I was, one of the things I was heartened to see was the amount of people that wanted to, prioritise things like cycling in there, and also concerned for making sure that disabled people could get access to there as well, so we could all enjoy it. I think that's really really good way of going. Like you say, the consultation was absolutely amazing on that. I went to some of the things as well, same as the leader did, just to echo his sentiments that people were actually engaging and telling us things and saying they really appreciated it being there. It wasn't what they thought it was going to be. They thought it was just going to be the option of like, what kind of big wall do you want up so you can't see the sea? Obviously it wasn't that. There were things there, they've got grass buns, raised platform, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's a really good report. I'm really looking forward to the next stage of this one.
Great. Okay. Ben?
I just thought I'd bring it in from a planning perspective. I think it's really important that we continue to look at the two things side by side, because councils can have a risk of silo working, and it's not isolated to Portsmouth. That is a local government issue, and ensuring that we develop the SPD alongside the coastal defences scheme is really, really crucial. And I would just encourage members of all parties to engage in the seafront master plan as we go forward.
Matthew?
Thank you. I'd just like to congratulate everyone involved in both the seafront master plan and also the coastal defence scheme consultation. I've been obviously I have quite a bit of beach in my ward in Eastern Craneswater, and this is so important for people of that area, but also, as has been shown in the engagement from the community across the city, this is everyone's seafront, and I think one of the great things that's come out of this consultation is how many people attended away from Southsea, and up in places like Cosham, Fratton, which has been absolutely fantastic, and that really has shown that people do care. And it's something that I've known about for some years, because I talked to people up in places like Nelson and Copner Ward, and even in Cosham, who had said about the seafront way back sort of 6-7 years ago. One of my first meetings as a councillor 6.5 years ago was about the seafront master plan, the sea defences. And the engagement since then has been absolutely fantastic. I went to the two consultation events in my ward in Eastern Community Centre and Canoe Lake, and what impressed me so much was A, the engagement from the local residents, but also B, the engagement from the staff involved. They gave an enormous amount of time. They were extremely patient. They had some people who were very angry, some people who thought that we were going to stick up a wall, but they took enormous amount of time to explain, but engage, not in a patronising way, but a really, really good way. And I think the response we've had since then has been fantastic. So I commend everyone who's got, we had over 1,700 at consultation events, we had over 1,400 responses, and it's just really fantastic to see. So I'm really looking forward to the next stage. It's really going to help us with the planning application, with securing funding, the fact our engagement's been so good. So I heartily support the recommendation.
Okay, Susie.
Again, just to place on record my thanks to the team who did the consultations, particularly from an educational perspective, because not only I think the resources were in themselves educational, people were learning loads of stuff actually at the consultations, but also the engagement with schools. And if, Claire, you ever get stuck, pop down to St Swithin's, because there were some great models there the other day when we went to judge their competition, and it was just really heartening to hear kids talk about longshore drift and all this stuff, and actually going home and educating their parents too. So thank you very much to everyone involved.
Okay, Rob?
Very comprehensive report, and obviously the seafront matters. So I have the seafront and I know how passionate people are about the seafront. Just a couple of points I want to make sure is obviously people spent a lot of time, because they're passionate about it, putting down their ideas. I would plead also for the silent ones. Susie just mentioned them, children. You tend to get a lot of older people go there and say, we're going to do X, Y, Z. We mustn't forget children, because this is one of the key areas I'm really worried about, that in the design of this, we look between the lines of each of these answers, and when we go and enact the strategy, we obviously refer back to these so we can clearly identify with those who've given their input that what's happened, but we also identify the people who may not have spoken but are there. And I think at the final thing is to make sure that silo working I heard doesn't happen, which is, you know, this is about regeneration of the city, this is about culture and leisure, and sometimes when people go out and to do stuff, they don't look broadly and say it's also actually about people. Thank you.
Okay, Steve?
Yes, just to echo the words of others in terms of the brilliant work by the ESCP team in doing these consultation events. They were thoroughly professional throughout, and as Matt alluded to, sometimes some people came in quite cross but left seemingly satisfied. Not something you can say about everything the council does. So a real positive there. Just a bit of reassurance for Rob. There was a concerted effort to push out the consultation via social media to make sure that we were reaching young people, and I think the demographics sort of reflect that, and that was a really important part of what we did. So a huge thanks again to them, and also to Claire's officers who were doing the consultation work around the SPD as well. Very important to do as Ben said, and remember that this is a twin track approach, and that the two documents need to talk to each other properly, so we got some joined up thinking on it. The only other comment I wanted to make was to thank fellow members on the cross-party working group. We've had a very effective and engaged discussion on there. Councillor Luke Stubbs comes along and represents the Conservatives. Councillor Judith Smythe, who's also with us today in the gallery, comes along and represents the Labour Party, and we have very open and frank discussions. All cards are on the table. Everybody knows what's going on at every stage of the process. It means that we've been able to move forward with confidence that we've got the support of the full council, and this is not a political issue. It's something that, as others have said, we're delivering for the next generation, and it's absolutely vital that we get it right. So thanks to those guys as well.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with the report? Thank you much indeed. Okay, let's move on to item 9, budget monitoring. Christopher.
Thank you, Leader. Excuse me. So this is the first of two budget reports on your agenda today. The first one deals with the in-year position, so the current year's budget. The second one looks into next financial year. Excuse me. So within this report, this is for the first half year, so it's for the first 6 months of the year, and at this stage we have a forecast overspend in the current year of £4.5 million. It's made up of a number of overspending areas, but also offset by a number of underspending areas. The largest of the overspending areas are children's social care and adult social care. Between them, we're forecasting an overspend on both those services, cumulatively amounting to 8.6 million. There's also a forecast overspend with MMD of around about £3 million. Offsetting those, we have a release from the contingency of around of £3 million. So when the budget was originally set in February, there was always a risk that the adults and children's social care budget would be under pressure during the year, so we deliberately set aside £3 million within the council's contingency to guard against that, and now we are obviously releasing that now that those risks have come to fruition. In addition to that, we have some additional income and savings associated with our treasury management activities. That amounts to 2.9 million. Take all of those things together and we have broadly an overall forecast overspend of 4.5 million. Importantly, if you look more deeply into the forecast overspending positions, one of the big questions for us is how much of that will continue into future financial years. We often describe it, or I often describe it, as the underlying deficit or the structural deficit. For children and adults, that amounts to £5.5 million. There is some potential remedy on the horizon with additional government funding that's been announced in the national budget. But the extent to which that 5.5 million can't be remedied will add to the council's future forecast budget deficit and therefore have to be recovered through savings that are planned into future financial years. So the extent to which this 5.5 million can't be recovered would impact on the savings requirements from not for next financial year, not for 1920, but for 2020-2021. In the year, the extent to which we end up at the end of the financial year with an overspending position, that will be a call on the Council's general reserves. Excuse me. So, happy to take any questions, Leader.
Okay, for me, there are three areas of significant concern. The first is the losses at MMD, because this is a council-run company that the council bought to make money, and it's not, and there's £3 million of loss there. Second, adult social care, where there's some extra money coming from government, and that will help, and there looks as if there is a sensible and worked-through plan to be able to address the issue. And finally, the pressure on children's social care budgets, which is extremely worrying, and I know we have people in to try to do work at the council to try to make sure that is turned around. But as Stephen is here, Stephen, could we ask for your help? One of the underlying problems we've got is that the government promises to back finance or to pay back the council for the cost of looking after unaccompanied minors, and we think we're about £1 million short on what the government say they will do to what they actually do. We've attempted to talk to ministers, but they won't meet us. So, Stephen, if you can, great. If you can bring us a cheque, we will be overjoyed. But it is. I've sat in briefings at the Home Office with ministers saying, actually, everything will be fine. We'll share the pressure out around all councils, and actually the government will pick up the full cost. And it just doesn't happen, and that's not on. That we have to take. We're looking after 100, and there are other councils who refuse to look after even one, and that's not on. So Stephen, any help you can give us with that would be really appreciated. I think it's Caroline Noakes, who's the minister who we've tried to talk to, but without success. Although, having seen the news yesterday, I think she's got quite a lot of other things on her plate. So, colleagues, we clearly need to keep this under a review to make sure that we turn this round as much as possible. Anything colleagues would like to add? Rob?
Okay. Chris, we've mentioned the underlying pressures on children's, and Stephen has offered his help there. In terms of trajectory, because obviously turning around can only happen if in fact there is something you can address. But when you're in a situation of uncontrolled demand, and this is a national issue, because I know from my other colleagues that they're extremely worried about the trend. This is both unaccompanied minors, which is a specialisation for us on the port, but also children in general coming into care. In your factoring of where this is going, I mean, normally you're backward looking, meaning you're looking at the figures that are currently there and projecting forward on to-date basis. But there are some figures that you need to look at and say, where are they actually going to be? Are you doing that? Because that's really important.
Yes, we are, Councillor Wood, and our estimates of the overall. So children's social care at present we're forecast to 5.6 million overspend in the current year. Our estimates, when we track that forward and project forward into next financial year, is the part of that will continue amounts to 3.9 million. And you're right to point out some of that does relate to unaccompanied minors, and we believe that on a prudent estimate that's around about 1.3 million. But we could probably demonstrate that when you take all things into account, that's probably a larger number than that. But you'll also recognise within the report that if you look over what's happened just in terms of the growth in looked after children, but over the last, I think it's 4 years or so, the growth in looked after children has been 133. So it's a 42% increase in looked after children, and that's the primary cause of the issue that faces the council. And you're right, it's a national issue, but it bears out as a local problem to resolve.
Ben.
Thank you, Leader. I think there are two things I just wanted to touch on, one that you've picked up on and one that I think we need to reflect on. The first one is around MMD, and obviously, as you know, myself, Chris Ward as the Finance Officer and Councillor Jones as the PRED spokesperson for the main opposition are all non-executive directors of MMD. I think it's safe to say that MMD is in a transitional period, given that it's lost a key customer at the start of last year. I think it's really important that as a council and as the owner of MMD, we look at all potential options for that site, and the council is working up a piece of a report that will come to Cabinet in the new year, Chris, outlining the options we have as a council. That said, I'm fairly confident that MMD as a company will return to profit in the next 2 years, and in the meantime it continues to be a positive impact on the council's revenue budget due to the rent it pays and the port dues it pays. So there are positives and negatives around the MMD story that we just need to put in context when we think about the budget as a whole. The other point is that at our last Cabinet meeting we approved our new income generation strategy, which I think is absolutely crucial when we start to think about the future of the council's finances, and whilst pressures in adult social care and children's social care will continue to exist, I suspect, we need to consider the potential savings we will have to make in terms of potential opportunities for income generation, not just traditional looks at savings on council services.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren.
2 points. First, this isn't a question, Chris, this is a thank you for actually focusing quite heavily on the structural deficit. It was pretty clear when we came in that lots of things were occurring, and it's also helpful to be honest with people that lots of this are not individual factors, but actually long-term factors that need to be dealt with, and it seems to fall to us to try and deal with them. But I think it's very useful to have that in there. I just wanted to note that in my own portfolio we have an overspend due to temporary accommodation, which is down to the impact of the Homelessness Reduction Act in 2017. I've already tasked officers to come up with some ideas on how to reduce that impact. I look forward to bringing those forward. It may not be for the end of this financial year, Christopher, but it may be for the foreseeable future, because we need to make sure that's right. See you soon, Stephen. To make sure that's right, because and I think that's true with all of us. Like Ben, I'm concerned about MMD, but I'm sure that this will return to profit very soon. Thank you, Gerald.
Matt?
Thank you. Yeah, just on the, obviously, adult social care, and it's just a sort of a note there really about the £890,000 which has come in from government for winter pressures. As ever, it's never enough. With adult social care, of course, they do like to completely divorce it from the NHS, where they like to increase funding for the NHS, and of course they call themselves the Department of Health and Social Care, but of course they cut the social care budget year on year through local government, which is very helpful, or rather it isn't. But again, I had a I know this is the end of Q2, but I had a budgetary monitoring meeting this morning, and the situation in adult social care is stabilised, but we also do have that robust plan in place, which has got the complete support of the whole of the administration to move forward to a situation whereby we can move to a place where we're not in deficit anymore in sort of 2 or 3 years' time. But we are doing our very best. Again, like with children's, we have cost pressures that are uncontrollable, where things just come up. So if you have someone who comes with a lot of care needs and a lot of cost, and they just appear on our doorstep, we have to deal with that. So that is always a pressure. So I'd like to thank all of the finance staff, and especially all of the staff in all of the departments in the council who work so hard to keep our situation in a place we wouldn't want it to be, because we don't want an overspend at all, but they keep it could be much, much worse. So I think there really is a tribute to every member of staff who who work so hard to make sure that we do the best possible job we can in these really restrained financial times where we are getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and yet we are providing excellent service.
Okay, colleagues. Sorry, Steve.
Just a quick one. In the interests of transparency, since the meeting is being live streamed, several people referred to Stephen. That was Stephen Morgan MP, who was sat in the gallery today, and he was confirming that he had written to the Minister about this issue. I think it's important that we do that properly. Yeah. The other part, can you pass that on, Judith, because it was a bit folksy, the way that we had the discussion took place, rather than formal. The other thing I just wanted for any members of the public who may be watching to note that we are taking our responsibilities to get control of the Council's budget very seriously, and in that regard we're looking at an outside team who are about to engage to assist children's social care with that. And both myself and the leader are working to support Councillor Wood, so he's not on his own trying to deal with such a massive issue. It is a big issue, and it needs a team of people to be working on it, and we're making sure that happens. So I'm sure you are, Rob. But it is important because budget pressures are not about portfolios. We've had other mentions today about councils tend to work in silos. It's a collective responsibility of all of us to work together to make sure that we hit the council's budget and to make sure that portfolio holders know that they've got a team working with them and not that they're working on their own.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with this? Thank you very much indeed. Final report is for us just to send on to full council with a list of the savings. The place for this, as far as I'm concerned, is to be discussed at full council. So can I recommend that we just send this on?
Yes.
Okay, colleagues, thank you very much indeed. That is the end of this meeting. Thank you everybody for attending. And Cabinet members, if people have time, can I just get you to loiter for a bit?